Okay.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to a very exciting Career Foundry event this evening, where I'm joined by Alex, or better known as Alex the Analyst, who is obviously an analyst himself, but a YouTube star with his channel. Alex the Analyst. And we know that we've got a lot of people joining this evening. So if you just want to pop on the right-hand side where you're joining from, maybe also why you're interested in learning data analytics, and any questions, just pop them in the chat on the right-hand side. I'll be doing a quick introduction and I'll be handing the floor over to Alex. But before we kick off this evening, I'd just like to very briefly introduce Career Foundry. So as some of you may know, we are one of the older players in the industry, and we teach people in-demand skills from scratch. We do data analytics, but we've also got other programs: UX design, UI design, web development, digital marketing, and we've just released product management too. But this evening is all about data. I can see lots of people are joining from Portsmouth, Boston, New York, London. Hi, everybody. We've also got people watching on YouTube and LinkedIn. A couple of house rules before I pass over to Alex. We will be doing a live Q&A at the end. So whilst Alex is talking, and you may have any questions about, I don't know, data analytics or the industry or salaries or anything which Alex is going to present, just drop them in the Q&A. Also, if you're watching on YouTube and LinkedIn, I'll reappear at the end and I will answer those questions. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is William, and I'm the Communications and Events Lead here at Career Foundry. I don't really want to steal Alex's thunder, because I know that there's a really great presentation here. So I'll just turn back to the first slide. Alex, I think I'll just pass it over to you. I'll disappear into the background, and then when you're finished up, just to call me back into the room, and we can jump right into that Q&A.
All right, that sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. If you don't know who I am, I'm Alex Freeberg, and I'm a data analytics manager. Let me actually go to the slide where I have some of my information so I can look at it. Here we go. So, I started off my career at a very small nonprofit. I was just a data collection specialist and analyst. Over the past 5 years since I started, I've worked my way up to a data analytics manager. I've had a very fast career path. And a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today are things that, I'm hoping you cannot make those same mistakes. I thought this was a really great topic because I don't often talk about all the mistakes I've made. I try to not talk about those, talk about the things I did right. But we can also learn from the mistakes I've made. But I work at a very large company, a Fortune 10 company. I specialize in SQL, Python, and cloud applications. I use a lot of Power BI, Microsoft Azure, a lot of SQL, and some other software as well. And then at the very bottom, I have a YouTube channel. If you've never heard of my YouTube channel, go check it out. It's not bad. It's for data analysts. Got a lot of good stuff. So I'm going to jump right into it. My background is very untraditional. I have a degree in recreational therapy. It's probably something nobody here has heard of, I'm guessing. But it was going towards the path of occupational therapy, physical therapy. I was going to go to master's and go get my master's in that. But I moved to Dallas for this internship in recreational therapy at this behavioral health hospital. And it was a really interesting time because I was away from everything that I'd ever known. I'd never lived in Dallas. And I met this girl and I was like, I got to stay. And so I scratched all my plans to go back and live with my parents and get my master's degree to become an occupational therapist. And I just started looking for any jobs that I could possibly get. And I got one at the nonprofit that my wife was working at. Well, she was my girlfriend at the time, so I'm really glad that panned out. But she was my girlfriend at the time, and she got me a job as basically a resident advocate. I was just working with, people who had been abused, and I was helping them live and get jobs and do paperwork, and I would drive them places. That's what I did. So they had an opening at this company for a data collection specialist and analyst position, and it was not great pay. It was nothing I really had a lot of knowledge on, but they really liked me there just as a person. And so I applied, they gave me a shot, and I got it, and it was mostly only using Excel. So, it wasn't super tech heavy, but it was very data focused because we had to submit the data for the grants. Well, at the very end of that job, I realized, or I came to learn about something called SQL. I instantly fell in love with it because I was just like, this is a great skill to have. I really should learn this. And that's kind of where everything snowballed. And after I learned SQL, the very first job I got was what I would consider my first like big boy job, or my first like real job, data analyst job, where I was working at the small healthcare analytics company, which was a fantastic company to work for. Um, so that's me. That's where I come from. Again, very untraditional. I had to learn the hard way most of the time about what not to do. And so let me go to the next one. This is our first one. We have 8 of them, and I'm gonna share a lot of stories that I don't think I've ever shared before with my YouTube channel or on LinkedIn or anywhere. Because again, I don't like talking too much about the mistakes, but that's 100% what we're going to be talking about today. So hopefully we can all laugh at Alex's mistakes together. But the very first one, I think this is one of the very first mistakes I ever made. It was I learned the basics, and then I was like, okay, I don't need those anymore. I'm going to move on to like the important stuff, the good stuff. And, as I've matured in my career, I've quickly come to realize that 90% of the job that you actually do is working with those basics. The ones that you want to skip over, the ones you think are super simple, and you're like, I just want to get to the advanced stuff. The super simple stuff is typically the stuff that is like really the meat and potatoes of what you do. At least that's what I found. And I've talked to lots of other analysts, and, they say the same thing. Um, I do mentorships, and oftentimes people will come and they'll talk to me, and they'll show me their portfolio, or they'll show me some work that they've been working on, and it'll be some of the most advanced stuff, like really like they're doing some machine learning, even they're doing some really advanced Python stored procedures, and data architecture and databases, which none of that is bad. None of it is inherently a bad thing to learn, but the problem with it was I was like, "Hey, what are you trying to showcase? What are you trying to do?" When you're actually in the job, you're never gonna use this. Like 99% of the time, you will never use, these types of things that you're learning. And so I highly suggest doing that. And that was something that I messed up early on. I started learning, really advanced SQL and stuff like that on my own before I really understood the basics. And when I got into my job, that healthcare analytics job that I was talking to you about, a lot of these mistakes happened in that job. They got like the worst version of me because they got me like right out of like learning. And so I made most of my mistakes then. And so that is just it's a big one that I've seen across the board, not just with myself, with a lot of people. I typically will recommend people starting with SQL, Excel, and Tableau, or Power BI. If you want to learn Power BI, that is completely up to you. But these 3 are like, I consider like the trifecta of like beginner analytics. You can do almost 95% with just these tools. Different companies will have different softwares, of course, and you're going to need to pick those up. But if you're looking for a job, if you're just getting into a job, you can do so much with just these 3. People always ask me, do I need to learn Python right away? I'm like, Python is amazing. I love Python. I'm a huge, huge, huge Python fan, but I don't think you need to learn it like the very first skill. That's kind of bit more advanced, in my opinion. So that is the first mistake that I would say. I do have my notes over here, so don't mind me if I have to glance over here. But let's keep going. Let's go on to mistake number 2, which is not asking questions. Now, I want to say I was not a proud person, but I was, and I wanted to give the impression that I knew what I was doing in my job. So, again, let's go back to that healthcare analytics company. I mean, I wanted to give off the impression that I knew what I was talking about, that I knew what I was doing, and they made a good hire, right? This is my first job, my first like real job. And, it was a small company, it was only like 50 people. So oftentimes I would go to my boss, who was the director of, I can't remember his exact title, but he was at director level. And his boss was like the senior VP. So he was like really high up there in this really small company. And they would ask me questions, they'd ask me to do things. And 99% of the time, especially when I first started, like right off the bat, I'd be like, I got it. No problem. Like, I got that. And I go back to my desk and I'd be like, okay, what on earth was he talking about? I need to like research this. And I would research it for some of these really easy things that he would ask me to do would take me an entire day of researching, understanding what he actually asked, maybe going to my boss and kind of like subtly bringing it up. It's like, hey, remember when he said he wanted this? Yeah, so I'm going to go do this, right? And he's like, yeah. Because I didn't just ask him follow-up questions, which in retrospect would have made me look like I knew more about what I was doing. But again, that's why this is a mistake, is because I feel like when you get into a job, you have this perception like everybody knows everything. Everybody knows what they're talking about. Everybody already knows all that stuff that you don't know. Typically, that's not how it is. Typically, most people are in that same boat as you. They are just they have questions themselves, and you should ask questions. So, you know, the first bullet point says not asking questions slows down your growth, which means if I had just asked questions right away, I would have learned a lot faster in that actual job. Like I would have learned a lot more about what they wanted, what they were looking for, the skills that they wanted, better communication skills. Like I just really I was a bit too proud. I just wanted to give off this impression that I knew what I was doing when it was evident that I did not. I think me not asking questions actually did not know what I was. It had the opposite effect as what I was going for. Um, so let me see real quick. Excuse me. Uh, I, I, this when I glance over here, I laugh because there's this one specific story that really makes me cringe when I think about it, and I hope you get a laugh out of it too. It was one of the first projects that I had, and my boss brings me into his office. He's like, "Hey, we got this new client. Can you do this for him?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely, no problem." So I go and I spend, I think it was about 2 to 3 days working on this project. And, my boss was pretty hands off. He had a full workload. I was his only direct report. So he was doing like a ton of hands-on work himself. So he didn't really have time to like do a bunch of stuff. He'd come in and check on me every so often, like once or twice a day. And I'd be like, yep, I'm working on it. I got it. I would bring it back to him and he's like, Alex, you realize what I asked you to do, right? I was like, yes, you wanted this type of report. He's like, no, that's not what I needed, like at all. I actually needed this. And it was really, I want to say sad. I was like, I am so sorry. I was like, I messed up. I'm really sorry. I should have like asked follow-up questions. Um, so again, it just wasted like 2 to 3 days of that week where I could have been doing actual work. When what he wanted, it ended up only taking me about an hour or two once I actually really knew what he needed. It just takes a little bit of, it took a little bit of maturity in me to start realizing that I needed to ask those questions. Let's go on to the next one. Number 3 is not learning the business context. Now, when I say business context, that usually talks about, why are we building this? Why do you need this dashboard? Why do you need this report? Why do you need this data cleaned? Why do you need this? It's just asking that why. Oftentimes, especially because I'll hire people onto my team or I'll mentor somebody. Oftentimes, I see a lot of people will kind of just not ask. It goes back to that second question, right? Are you asking the right questions? Uh, Business context is super important because sometimes they're not going to know exactly what they need to know. So you'll say, I want this report, I want this dashboard. That's the client coming to you, and I'll say, okay, explain to me why you need that. They'll start explaining things to me, and I'm like, these things aren't adding up. And this happens more often than you think, especially in the job that I'm in now. This happens more often than you think. They're like, oh, well, this is why we need it. I'm like, well, if you're trying to get this, if you're wanting this outcome, you actually need to be looking at this data, or you need to be building this type of report. And understanding that business context of what they actually want, what the end goal of it is extremely useful. So you can ask questions like, why are we building this? and how will this help the stakeholders who use this? Because sometimes you're building things and they're going to hand that off to their team or their boss or something, and they're trying to display some type of information. So like with my work, I work as kind of the internal. I don't work on client facing in my current job. I work with everybody internal. So I work with all these different business teams within IT. And they'll come to me, they're like, "Hey, my boss wants a report that shows this information." I'm like, "Great. That's really good. Like, why do they want that? What are they trying to get out of it? What are they trying to measure? What metrics or KPIs are they tracking? Or are you guys tracking to make sure that he has that?" And as we start kind of going down that rabbit hole, as I'm asking these questions about why and how, typically it brings up some like issue. I'm like, well, you don't actually need that. So learning the business context has been really important, and that comes. There's a later point that I'm going to get to. I think it's like number 6 or 7. It really comes to just understanding how your team works, what your team does, and that comes with experience. And so you just kind of got to get into the job and learn it. Don't try to do what I did, which is be too proud, not ask questions, not try to understand the full scope of the project. You want to understand it from beginning to end, how you're going to be building it and why it's being used. All right. Mistake number 4. This one to me may be uh, if we look at the entire life cycle of a data analyst, this is one of the least sexy parts of the job. And something that I don't think gets enough love, in my opinion, because I like data cleaning. But mistake number 4 is not cleaning the data or not cleaning it properly. So, data in almost every aspect is going to be dirty. If you go on Kaggle or you go on Google Datasets or you go to my channel and you download my GitHub and download these data sets, oftentimes they can seem very, very perfect. It's like it's made exactly for what you need it for. That is It is a very big misconception that you're ever going to get that in a real job. Most of the time, you're getting like just horrible. I mean, it is shocking how bad this data is. There have been times where I've spent weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks, just cleaning data to prepare this data for future uses, and it is brutal. But if I didn't do it, it would just lead to a copious amount of mistakes down the line. And so when I first started, I didn't really know what data cleaning was. That was something that was really foreign to me because I just learned the basics of SQL, Excel, a little bit of Tableau. So data cleaning, I didn't even understand what it meant. But it's basically just the way that data is collected, the way that data is stored in a database, often is not ready to be exactly used for what you need it for. This second one, clean data may still need to be changed depending on what you're using the data for. Even if you have perfect data, I mean, the people you're working with are doing everything perfectly on their side. They're giving you the data, it looks pristine. Even then, you are still going to have to transform that data like almost every time based on their end goal or their end product. So if they want a specific dashboard, if they want a specific report, you are going to need to transform that data and clean that data to make it even more useful and more specific to what they want. So clean data is even if you get perfectly clean data, it's not always clean. But one thing I promise you is that if you are the person that does that work, you are going to be like you're people's favorite person because most people don't want to do it. I worked on a team. We had several analysts, and my boss would always ask who wants to clean the data. And I just became known as the data cleaning guy. Like that was just my thing. I would work with the data engineers, I'd work with the database developers, and I really liked it. But everyone else would be like really thankful and like really appreciative that I was cleaning this data because they didn't want to. And so, I feel like my skills really advanced because the data cleaning process can be quite intensive. My skills grew. People liked that I was doing that work for them and that they didn't have to do it. So there was a lot of benefits to it. It just took me a while to understand that I needed to clean data and what that really was. All right. Mistake number 5 is rushing to build. Now, this is one that I think that I initially started doing because I was just, again, I wanted to show that I was doing a good job. I was getting them a product quickly. Like I wanted to just get to the end product and be like, hey, I delivered it in a day. They're like, how did you do that? This is supposed to take like a week. Well, it was because I was just really rushing to get out a product. I was rushing to get out the deliverables that they wanted me to give them. And, you know, as I've been more and more in this job, I realize that it's a much deeper well and a much more difficult task to actually get that end product than it looks like. Most people, if you're using dashboards, like if you're at your job right now and you use a dashboard, you use something, if you're working on on a larger scale, there is a huge team working on the back end to do all these different things just so you can see this one dashboard. It's a large process. And so, most people want to jump into like what I would consider the fun part, which is actually creating the visualizations, making it look nice, giving the deliverable, handing it off and like signing off on it. And you're like, this is fantastic. It's done. But that's not where like 80% of the work is. It's getting the data from the source, which is already a process in and of itself, cleaning that data, transforming it, moving it from production environment or development environments or testing environments to production environments. There was a lot of steps. So rushing into build is kind of one of those things that I just had to, I just had to learn it because I kept making this mistake for probably the first like month or two of my job. I was just like, all right, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do it. It just wasn't smart to do. And with that, oftentimes when I finished those projects really quickly, 9 times out of 10, it was not done correctly. Either the numbers were really off, and something that would happen, again, it's embarrassing to say, but something that would happen often is I go to my boss, I'm like, hey, here's what you wanted. It looks great. All the data was there. And he looks at it and he's like, just knowing what I know that this is wrong. And it just immediately like, you're just like, oh gosh, what do you know? Like, what do you know that I don't know? And he's like, I know for a fact they only, build $1 million worth of something. And over here you have like 1.8 million. I don't know where those numbers came from. I don't know how you got that. I just know it's wrong. So I go back and then I would do the whole process and I do it correctly. I'd have to clean the data, make sure I was pulling from the right hospitals when I was working at that healthcare analytics company. And then I would get the right number and bring it back to him. And he's like, this is what I was looking for. So just, slowing down is really, really important. So this slide right here, I'm going to zoom in on, I hope it doesn't disrupt what you guys are doing. I'm going to zoom in on my screen. This is the life cycle of a data analysis project. I just found this online. I found this and I was like, hey, I really like this. I want to show this to you guys because this kind of backs up my point of doing things in stages. So let me see, because I think there's this thing where I can draw on here. Here I go. All right, this may look terrible, but we're going to do it anyways. Let's see how it turns out. This step, oh, that looks great. This step 6, this is the step that I typically was rushing into. And I would just kind of jump to, I'm like, okay, I have the data, boom, I'm going to go and go build it. And that's what this part is. So this is actually like, completing the story, making these recommendations. I wanted to get to this step as quickly as possible without having to do all the other steps. So really quickly, you can see that step one is understanding the business issue. That is that understanding the business context that we talked about. That is one of the first things you need to do. And you have to understand why we need it and, define these objectives and actually gather some of that information. That's the asking those questions. Then you need to collect the data. And then the very next thing you have to do is cleanse that data, that cleansing and formatting and joining all this, like right here, when it says gather data from multiple sources, you have to join that information. Let me take that off because you can't see. But cleansing it, that is a huge step that needs to be done properly. Otherwise, you're going to make mistakes. This next one, step number 4, it really depends on what you're building. So whether it's, the step 4 isn't always done depending on the project, because sometimes, you're going to skip steps. But this one, whether it's creating models, developing different methodologies, and then step 5 and 6, which is you're finalizing that project, right? You're now at the final stages, and that's where I kept wanting to rush into. Ignore all those circles. I just put those on there, but we'll go on to the next one. Next one is not learning domain knowledge. Now, this is on a few different levels. And so I'm going to give you a few different examples of why domain knowledge is important. Now, you don't have to learn no domain knowledge. I actually know people who are kind of like generalists. They're consultants. They work in healthcare, finance, different industries, and they never really specialize in anything. And that's totally fine. That is a-okay. But at least for me personally, and this is my presentation, so I can say whatever I want. From my perspective, it really hinders you in the long run by being a generalist. Let me give you an example, and this was an exact conversation that I had with one of my mentees that I was working with. He was coming in from a totally different field, and he was like, he got his first job as a data analyst at a nice company. I was really proud of him because this is not his background. He got his first job. He was doing great. He was still my mentee. A year later, because he was with me for a while, he just wanted to keep up. A year later, he got a new job, and then he got another contract and all these things. And he asked me, he's like, I feel like I want to go and take this other position. And at that point, he had done it for almost 2 years. I've been working with him for a long time. He had been a data analyst for almost 2 years. And I was like, you're getting to a point where you need to make a decision. Like you need to choose. And he didn't understand why I said that. The reason is let's say you were a data analyst for 5 years. You're 5 years of experience. You're considered a mid-level analyst, potentially even on the borderline of senior analyst for most companies. So you're a mid-level senior analyst. For a lot of companies, they are going to want someone who really knows their domain if they're paying mid-level to senior level salaries. So I told him, I said, hey, look, you're going down the path of being a generalist. You're switching industries. You're not really focusing on one. You have broad industry knowledge, which isn't a bad thing again. But I said, if you really want to get to the next level, if you really want to take your salary to the next step to make like 100,000 or more, I was like, I really recommend you learning domain knowledge. So the other side to that is he has 5 years and he doesn't specialize, or he does specialize. Well, if he does specialize, those companies are going to be very attracted to his resume, him as a person, because he specialized, and they are going to pay really well for that 5 years of experience in that industry. Whereas if he just has that general knowledge, they're going to be like, okay, that's great, but we need someone to be able to specialize. There is a whole, consulting, freelancing where you can be a generalist. I have found that it is better to be a specialist than to be a generalist, especially in data. So let me see if I missed anything in these questions really quick, because I was on a roll. But actually, this goes back. This is what I was talking about on number 3, which is knowing business context. This domain knowledge is directly correlated to the business context and understanding that. It's hard to know what to ask if you don't understand that industry well. And so sometimes you can kind of probe and understand it a little bit, but really understanding it at a deeper level, you really need to understand that domain. So for me, it was understanding healthcare. So I had worked on the healthcare side, like the client facing, not in analytics at all, like working in hospitals, working at what was that called? A rehabilitation center, like different places. Like I knew what it was like to work in healthcare. I knew how tough it was. Understanding the data side of it was really utilizing that information that I had, but understanding the data side of it. And so I was able to ask a lot better questions, and I was able to understand where they were coming from, because I would talk to doctors like directly, and the doctors would be working with me, and they're like, oh, I would say, yeah, it sounds like this. And they're like, oh, you must have worked in a hospital before. And I'm like, yeah, I have. Like I did lots of internships, and I've done this stuff on your side. So I know what it looks like working in an EHR or stuff like that. That stuff is invaluable. And that's what really projected me on a very quick pace in my career. That's why I'm an analytics manager in 5 years rather than a lot of people. It takes longer. I think it's just because I specialized in one area and became really, really good at it. That's that to me has been a huge, huge thing in my career. So I don't want you to make the mistake where you just generalize too much. For most people, that's not going to be a good thing to do. All right, mistake number 7. This one is a little bit more specific. This one is documentation. Now, when I say documentation, I think most people out there watching are not happy that I'm saying this, and that's okay. But documentation is one of those hidden things that you just have to do, and not many people talk about it. I probably should at some point, like on my YouTube channel, but documentation is one of those things that you really, really, really should do it. Like there's so many consequences to not doing it and so many upsides to doing it. It's kind of hard to make the case for the opposite. Um, for example, someone is going to come to you at some point in your career and they're going to be like, "Hey, John," or "Hey, Alex, remember that project you did 6 months ago? Well, could you go and find those source files? Could you go and show me where that data is? Can you go and tell me how you built out that dashboard?" And you do not want to be the person who's like, "I don't know any of that. Let me go look it up." And then you can't find it because you didn't document properly. This one to me is one of those ones that people don't like to hear. It's not fun. It's not from my perspective. Some of you guys are like, "Dude, Alex, I love documenting. That's my life. That's like my love language." I'm like, "Hey, go for it." That's not me. I didn't like it, so I didn't do it. And inevitably, that came back to bite me on several occasions where they're like, "Hey, do you remember that project from 3 weeks ago, a month ago? Do you have the emails for that? Do you have um, the sign off for that? Do you have where the data is coming from? All these different things." And I just didn't keep track of it. Like that was not anything I cared about, anything I was thinking about. It was honestly, it was a mistake. It was mistake number 7. But genuinely, it was something that I learned, especially when I got to my current company. I've been working here for almost 4 years. They really drilled into me the importance of documentation, and it saved me on so many occasions that now I'm kind of like I'm a big believer in it. And so, if you're in a job where you don't do that, I would recommend doing it because somebody is really going to benefit from that, probably you in the future. So, one other thing on this is like, just imagine you get sick. You have to be out for like a week or 2 weeks, and you have to hand off your projects to the next person. The question you should ask yourself is that person who you're handing your work off to, are they going to be able to pick up where you left off based off your documentation? If the answer is no, you probably should be documenting better. That's kind of like my barometer. If they cannot pick up my work, if I'm gone for a week, 2 weeks, a month, or I'm taking a huge vacation for like 2 months, if they can't pick up and understand what I've done and where they're going, what they need to do, I've failed. It's not good documentation. There's also, and that's kind of broader documentation. There's also documenting within your code, which is similar but different, right? This is more like when you're writing your code. If you're writing in Python, if you're doing PySpark, if you're writing in R, you can make comments. Or if you're writing SQL, you can write comments and explain how these things are connected, where this data is coming from. Highly recommend that as well. Super, super important. All right, on to the last one. I think I'm running over on time. I apologize. I was supposed to go 30 minutes, but we'll keep going. This last one is uh, many people don't know. So the mistake is isolating yourself, and many people don't know this. I've worked on this. I've worked on myself a lot. Um, I would definitely say I'm much more introverted. Once I get to know you, I can be outgoing, typical introvert. But I don't. I again, this is kind of awkward to say. I don't make friends super easily. Like I just am not a talker. I'm not somebody who likes to go out and talk. Um, if so, I don't mind eating alone. Like sometimes I prefer it. It's not something that I really thrive in. I don't thrive in like making personal connections with people, which um, I don't know. It feels weird to say now because I've gotten a lot better at it. But especially at the beginning of my career, I was a loner. I just like to do things myself. And so one thing that I've noticed, especially as I've come out of come out of that introversion or however you want to call that, I've tried to make myself and force myself to be more personable and more outgoing. As I've done that, I found that my job has gotten easier. It's easier to ask questions because now I'm like, it's just, it's a buddy at work. I can go ask them a question. It's no big deal. Whereas before I was like, I feel like I was like a nuisance. Like I was bothering them. I just didn't have like, any connection with them. It was just like a work mate, not a work like friend or anything like that. So it took longer to get things done because I would try to just do stuff myself. And if you've ever worked on a team in the data world, like you have to rely on each other for certain things. Like I'm not going to go and try to do or find things that the database developer or data engineer does because that's going to take me hours. Where it could take them literally like a minute. Um, and so it makes your job harder being by yourself. And I also think it's just a big psychological thing to have somebody at work or have someone at work that you can talk with. Again, I didn't do that probably for the first 3 4 months of my first job as a data analyst, and it was just rough. It wasn't fantastic, but I learned a lot about myself. I was like, I learned that if I want to get my job done better and I want to connect and actually be like invested in this job, I need to connect with people. So actually talking with them, connecting with them, making like work friends, like that's important. And another huge side effect, the last one is you're going to get promoted faster. And just like make connections faster and get promoted for different jobs faster. That is, I would say, a lot of these things have contributed to how I've gotten to where I am. But one of the biggest things is I've made really strong connections with the people that I've worked with. At the company that I'm at 3 years ago, I was a junior data analyst. And now 3 years later, after starting a junior data analyst position, I'm an analytics manager. And so, a lot of that came from being very personable, being very accountable, and making these relationships and connections. Because whenever there was up for a promotion or different things, they were like, "Oh, Alex is a great fit for this. He has the personality for it. He has the skills for it. We want Alex." Like that's what can come from making these connections and not just being a loner, right? Um, it's hard. And so, I'm fully remote now and I still have to make an effort to reach out and connect with people because it's so much easier to isolate yourself when you're remote. I've been remote for 2.5 years now, ever since March of 2020 when, the pandemic really hit the US. I really have to make a more tangible effort because I used to just be able to walk over to my buddy's like desk or their office or whatever and just talk to them. Now I have to like reach out and schedule time on our calendar to just chat and make that connection. So um, that is all of the mistakes. Again, I have made all of them at some point or another. Um, it and I've seen it just a lot in people I've worked with or people who ask me questions. A lot of these are mistakes that not just I make, although I have made all of them myself, I promise you. They're mistakes that I see a lot. And so hopefully, just listening to this and seeing it and kind of hearing my perspective on things, you can be like, "Oh, I'm making that mistake literally right now." Like I'm not documenting. I'm isolating myself. I'm trying to do way too advanced things that could much simpler thing could be done with it. Hopefully somebody out there, benefited from, learning about all the mistakes that I've made in my career, which this is only the tip of the iceberg, but um, let's go on to the next one. So now we're going on to our very last segment. I'm supposed to tell you when I'm done. I'm done. So I think we're gonna get into the actual questions now, which I love answering questions. So I can't wait to hear what you guys ask me.
Alex, thank you very much for the presentation. I also find it amazing that there seems to be a lot of people in the audience who love data cleaning. But I think
I don't have my chat open, so I can't see that. But guys, all my data cleaners out there, you guys are the real heroes. You guys really are.
we've there's a lot of people in the audience who love data cleaning too. So just watch
That's
this
awesome.
space.
That's
But I thought the
beautiful.
presentation was really, really good, not only for people who maybe just started out in the field, but also for those considering jumping into the world of data analytics. I'm going to take questions. I'm going to do a mixture between Big Marker, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And there was a good question up here on Big Marker. I think I'll start with some intro questions. And apologies if I pronounce anyone's name wrong. Haichum is asking, "Good morning, Alex. How easy or hard is it to switch to a career in data analytics?"
Um, let's see. That's a question that I think should and needs to be asked more because the landscape is changing. I'm going to try to keep this brief. I know we have lots of questions. The landscape has changed. I started 5 years ago. It's much different now. Because of remote work, the access to available jobs has just broadened that horizon. Like analytics and data in general is just it's not going anywhere anytime soon. There's so many people trying to get into it. but actually breaking in, it's very possible for switching careers. I personally, I like I said, I do some mentorships. I have helped many people from just the most random backgrounds get jobs. Pharmacist, teacher, a lawyer, different. Those are just a few of the ones. Completely random backgrounds. It's very possible. You really just need to understand what you're good at, understand what your domain knowledge is in, try to reformat your previous experience to make it more analytics focused if you can, really make a good portfolio projects, make a great resume. All those things are it definitely makes it possible. I think almost anybody can do it. It just you have to put in a lot of work to make it happen.
Great answer, great answer. And I think Simon is actually following up with that question, just about how long will it take to secure a job in data analytics? So if you're starting out from scratch.
Yeah, so it depends on how much time you can invest. Let's say it's a full-time job. You can invest all your time. I've talked on my channel a lot about exactly the career paths, exact resources that you can take. I just talked about CareerFoundry on my channel as well. There's so many resources out there. If you hunker down and you really focus in on it like it's your full-time job, I think it's very possible to do it within about 4 to 5 months. Most people, it's going to take longer, right? It just depends on how quickly you learn. But I would say on the short end, about 4 to 5 months. Most people, you have to make money. You're probably, you have a job. You're doing it at night. Like that's how I did it. I just learned it at night after my full time job. I did it over the course of like 6 to 7 months. But I started studying like just every single night very consistently. And I got lucky and I chose SQL. I just really honed in on SQL and that turned out to be like the best skill to learn. So it can range. It could be as early as 4 months, or it could take some people a year, year and a half. Again, it just depends on how much time you can invest.
Mhm. And when you were working, Alex, were you putting all that work into a portfolio? How did you present what you were learning?
Uh, well, when I first started out, I didn't know what I was doing. So I just I put my portfolio project was a bunch of SQL scripts on a Word document that I sent in with my resume. That's what I did when I first started. I don't recommend doing that anymore. I recommend doing a project. So as you're learning the skill, as you learn SQL, try to find SQL projects. Try to find projects in Python or Tableau or Power BI and put them somewhere. Put them on a website, something like GitHub Pages or creating a website using Wix, which you can create a free website. You can host, and that can be your portfolio project, or that can be your portfolio, and you can put all your projects in there, and then you have a link in your resume or on your LinkedIn or wherever, and you can point people to that, and they can go and be like, "Wow, this is really good SQL code. It's well written. This is a really good Python project." And so yeah, that's how I would do it at least.
Fantastic. I'm going to switch to YouTube because I know we've got a lot of people watching over on YouTube, also on Alex's channel. Ayushi is asking an interesting question for a data analyst, or is being a data analyst a better career option for a person from a non-technical background?
Um, that's a really great question because I personally think it is. I don't want to stir any waters. I think it's one of the better ones. I'll say that. I don't know if it's the best, although I think it's the best. If you look at it on the spectrum, data analysis, business analysis, or a different type of analytic work is is a lot of understanding business operations, the business side of things, even data analytics. The more technical you get when you go into data science, data engineering, data architecture, those are very technical, much more technical than a data analytics position. I think data analytics is one of the best places to start to get into data, or even business analytics. I think it is one of the best and probably the lower barrier of entry for most people, because again, data scientists, all these other things, most people have a degree in it, or have a master's degree, or just really good on the technical side, which can take a long time to get good at. So I think it's a very good career path for people who are kind of starting out, because it's a low barrier of entry, but it's a high, high, high skill cap. Like I would consider myself pretty much an expert at SQL, really good at Python. Like I'm really good at these skills, but even I have places to go and learn with them. So there's a low barrier of entry, but there's a high skill cap where you have a lot of room for growth, which it just makes it a really unique kind of place to start.
Mhm, mhm. Another question on YouTube. Let me just scroll up here to the top. Ba, 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 ba. I think somebody was asking about how important is building a portfolio whilst you're learning or being a data analyst. I suppose this is kind of the next stage. Once you've put it all together, how important is that portfolio? Maybe for you it's a little bit difficult, but from your experience with interacting with other people, what's your experience of portfolios in the industry?
I'm a huge believer in it, but what is the importance? I don't think it is the most important. I think your resume is the number one thing that's going to get you a job or get you into an interview. Your personality and how you speak and your just knowledge on it is the other piece. Those two pieces are the most important. Your portfolio projects are for two things. One, it can help you get an interview. It definitely can. If somebody clicks on it, you even in an email say, "Hey, check out my portfolio projects on these skills." Like specify it to them. They can go and check it out and verify that you've worked on these and you know what you're doing. The second thing is one that I think is even more important. If you do not have any experience and you go into a job interview, they're going to ask you, how have you used SQL? And you're going to be like, well, I learned it on Data Camp. I learned it on YouTube. I followed Alex's tutorials, whatever. That doesn't give you any credibility. What does give you credibility is if you say, actually, because they say, how have you used SQL? Actually, I just built out a project. I pulled the data in via this. I used these types of queries, and you can point to that project as experience. That is how I see it most of the time, how it should be used. It can help you get an interview, but it can more help you land that job in the interview than anything else.
I think that also touches on another question asked on Big Market. How can I get my first work experience? If you studied and you've got your portfolio ready together, how can you get that first kind of like real world project or that land that first kind of gig?
Yeah, the projects are probably the easier one because you can do that all yourself, right? You can make a project, you can build it, you can use that as experience. I recommend people do that. I tell people to do that. You're not putting it on your resume as a job. You're just putting it under personal projects or portfolio projects you can point to and say you've used the skill, you know how to do it. Probably a much more difficult thing to do is try to do something like freelancing. Try to do something like, and this is something I did, and it actually did work, but it's rare. Is reaching out to local nonprofits, reaching out to local small businesses, and asking them if you can help them in this area. It actually worked for me because I was working with this small animal shelter, and I reached out to them, and I just did some like basic visualizations with their data and put it on their website. They put it on their website, and I could point to that and be like, "Hey, I consulted with this company. I did it for free. But I consulted with this company. I worked on it. Here's the tools I used, and you can go and see the work." A little more difficult. Projects are a lot more independent. You don't really need anybody else to do it.
That's also what I've heard from CareerFoundry students as well. I'm doing online events. There's also people who've been doing UX design or UI design, and they've asked friends, or
Yeah,
some family might have kind of, I don't know, like a wildlife group or something, and they need a little bit more help with their website. And it's a good kind of like entry level way to get that kind of real world experience and show that you've done a project.
for sure.
I feel that because we've got so many questions, or we've obviously got such a fan base from the data cleaners. I feel that we should take a few questions that go down that direction. Sade is asking, how do you make sure that data is clean?
Yeah, that's where do you stop? That's the question because um, oftentimes, and there are certain things that you're trying to achieve, and it definitely comes down back to that business context, understanding what the data needs to be used for. To give you like a super simple example, say you're doing something with countries, and the countries there's one that's spelled United States, there's one that's spelled United State, there's one that's America. Those are all the same thing, but they're spelled differently or said differently. Those need to be normalized, right? So you go and you normalize all that data, and it's all just United States. Well, is that as far as you need to go? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes you need to break it out, and break those things out even more, and categorize it on a higher level. Maybe you need to add data. We need to categorize it by continent. It could be endless, and it really comes down to business context. But honestly, typically when I'm cleaning data, you can never get it 100% clean. If we can get it to 90 to 95% exactly what we're looking for, most of the time that is plenty. You can keep going. It is possible to just keep digging in and keep cleaning, but at what point does it become less valuable? Like, is what you're working on going to actually return that 1% extra that you're going to get to be a cleaner? Is it worth it? Sometimes no. So it really is. It's very subjective, but kind of just know it when you know it. That helps.
The deep clean. At this point, I would also just like to shamelessly plug the CareerFoundry blog. We've got some great articles, and we've also got some specific articles on data cleaning. And we've got in-house editors who are putting this together, and there's a lot of data analytics content there. Also on Alex's channel, you'll also find some great videos, Alex the Analyst, on YouTube. I'm going to take one more question from the data cleaners because they were out in such strong force this evening. Denise is asking, what is your favorite resource to learn how to clean data?
You know, I learned it 100% on the job. I learned what it was on the job. I was taught how to do it on the job. I never, until I understood it better, I never understood what it was. Now that there's more resources out there, there's a few good places. I have found that there's like if you Google data cleaning course or tutorial, there's some out there. I have one on my channel, and I'm going to plug it just because I think it's really good. I have a portfolio project of cleaning data, and it's super simple and easy to do. That's a good place to start. Then you can branch out and try to find more advanced ones. But tutorials and projects where they actually show you how to clean data, that's what I would be looking for. Or techniques on how to do it, because you'll find a lot of articles about kind of like what data cleaning is and why it's important, but somebody showing you how to do it, it can be a little harder to find.
Definitely. I would just also say with the CareerFoundry program that you do get a dual mentorship model. So we do offer with a mentor and a tutor to help guide you through, so you're not there on your own. Alex, you've got a lot of fans out there. Claudia is a very big fan, and she loves your videos and watches them regularly. And I think Claudia is also asking a very interesting question, looking more at companies. So when looking for a data analyst role, how to know if the company is a good one to work at? Claudia is based in London, if that makes any, just for context.
That's a wonderful question. I'll give you a bit of my history. When I first got my first job, I had never thought about that. You're way ahead of where I was when I first started. I just wanted a job. I just wanted anything. The company I worked at it was a great company. I learned a ton, but it was a very small company. And looking back, I learned so much there, but that wasn't what I was looking for, because I got 3 kids. I needed something more stable. So what I do now is I literally make a list of what I am looking for. What is the number one thing? And on my list right now is not money. The number one thing on my list is flexibility. If I get a job offer and it's like $200,000 and they want me to move and do something, I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. I can't work 10-hour days. I have a family. I can't. Prioritizing what you want is really good, but where should you research that? I like Glassdoor. Glassdoor has a good barometer for reviews and stuff like that. I would also go on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has good stuff like that, where you can go and look at the company, review it, see what people are saying about it. I would also search it on Google. There was a company that I got. It was like a loan company or something like that, and they wanted me to be a senior data analyst or something. And I was considering it, and I looked them up online, and they had like a rating of a 2.4. Everyone was like, the work-life balance is terrible. The pay is just okay. The benefits are garbage. And I was like, whoa, no, thank you. So doing your due diligence, knowing what you find important, that's where I would start. And then, you can see what you can compromise on. Are you willing to compromise on the healthcare package? Are you willing to compromise on being remote versus in person? But I like lists. That's what I do.
Also, from live events that I've known, also with our career specialists, remember that if you get to the stage of an interview too, that's also a great chance for you to kind of scope the company out. So it's not just, the focus is not just on you. It's also your chance to work out, is this a company that I actually want to work for? What's the interview process like? So don't just see interviews as this kind of like focus just on you. It's a kind of getting to know both sides. Farhad is asking, I don't have a degree. Can I still become a data analyst? Farhad currently works in sales.
That's a great question. I'm going to give you somebody I mentored about a year and a half ago. I started mentoring him with. He's my biggest success story of all my mentees. He was a warehouse worker, and he now works at PayPal as a data analyst. He got his first job as a contract job at something random, used that experience and leveraged it to get this larger job, and now he's been at PayPal for about a year. That he is my successor. He's still one of my mentees. He doesn't need me anymore, but we just like to chat. It is 100% possible. And you can go and you can see lots of other stories like that online of people switching careers and not having degrees. Um, in my opinion, it's more of a mental block than anything, because when you see that other people with degrees are applying, it usually discourages you and it stops you. The number one thing that helped this person get to where he was at was he literally was reaching out to recruiters. He had like 6 or 7 recruiters he was reaching out to weekly. He would schedule calls with them weekly. He was constantly updating his portfolio. I mean, this dude was like, I want to change my future. Like, I don't want to do what I do for the rest of my life. And I'm telling you, he like put the effort and the work in, and now he's on track to make 100,000 probably by the next year or two. Like, it's insane. It is 100% possible. It just takes a lot of work, especially when you don't have a degree. It is a small barrier of some companies want a minimum of that degree, but you need to be out there to convince them, and you need to believe that you can do it. That to me is one of the biggest mental barriers. It's not as big of a deal anymore. It's really not. Even when I first started, it wasn't even a big deal. And that was 5 years ago. Now it's really not a huge issue. As long as you have the skills, you have the passion for it and like the drive for it, those factors are much more important.
Definitely, I think that's great advice. Skipping across again to YouTube, we've got another big fan called Gabe, the data analyst. Watch this space, Alex. I feel that competition is on the horizon. Hello, Alex.
Uh-oh.
I'm a big fan. What would be better, freelancing as a data analyst or an actual data analyst job?
I personally would probably just say the data analyst job. It's hard. I mean, it happens and you can do it. It's just, I've heard it's really hard to do freelancing, especially if you have no experience. You kind of have to have a history of work in order to do well freelancing. That's what I've heard. I've never done it myself. When you get a job as a data analyst, you're going to be taught, here's what you need to do. Here's how we do our processes. You learn a lot on the job. A lot of getting a entry level job that's the hardest part, because once you get that, you get experience on the job and you can leverage that experience to get other jobs. That's why it's so great. It's just hard to get that first job, but once you get it, it's so much easier to get other jobs. I feel like freelancing is a little bit more difficult to actually make happen and be successful at it. That's just, again, I haven't done freelancing, but that's just what I've heard and what I've seen.
Definitely. I think that will be the advice of CareerFoundry and career advisors too. The CareerFoundry full program, the data analytics program, the kind of the end goal is to land you either a junior or a mid to junior level job, which ties in quite nicely with Kieran's question. What type of projects will I be working on as a data analyst in a junior role?
Sure. At a junior role, you're expected to know a little bit. You're expected to know the technical skills, some of the basics of the technical skills, but they're more often than not, you're not expected to really know the industry knowledge super well. So typically they're going to give you, again, it depends on what kind of data analyst role, but if you're doing stuff where you're doing a lot of visualizations, a lot of reports and dashboards, you're on that side of the data analysis spectrum, they'll hand off to you projects. Typically, they're going to give you like 1 or 2 projects at a time. Now, as you get to mid-level senior, you're going to have 6, 7, 8 projects at a time, and you'll juggle a lot more. But, their goal is to get you to that place. So they're going to hand off small dashboards that they need built, and hopefully they'll work with you to understand where the data comes from and all that stuff. I wouldn't be expecting to do anything too advanced. You're probably not going to be building or helping build or design any data pipelines. You're probably not going to be doing a ton of the really in-depth data cleaning, because again, that can be really technical. You'll probably be doing some of the easier things, and they'll grow you and hopefully train you to get to that place.
Definitely. I think that's great advice. And also that, you kind of onboard new skills. If you're working in a great company, you onboard new skills as you go, and you should be delegated more responsibility. So you grow in the role.
Yep.
I think a lot of people fear that they have to go into a new position and know absolutely everything, which is not the case, especially in the junior kind of roles. Ben says, thanks so much for the presentation. Ben is very good technically and has a good business understanding, but his most important problem is communication. Would you say that this is the most important skill or soft skill as a data analyst?
Well, it's probably one of the more important soft skills. And you know, I think it's worth working on and investing in. And really the best way, because again, that was something that I semi struggled with at the beginning. Now I'm especially through my YouTube stuff, I become a much better communicator. But when I was first starting out, I did struggle with that as well. So what I did is I got a lot of interviews. Nobody wanted to hire me at first, but I got a lot of interviews. I used those interviews to really practice my communication skills. And I would ask for feedback. Um, Most of those interviews, I was like, they're not going to hire me. So let me just, do my best and, really try to, again, I point back to this, and I know most people don't believe me, but I was not a good communicator. I wasn't very outgoing or personable for a long time. I had to get into my own head before an interview. I would talk to myself and I would kind of like be like, okay, you know, remember to smile, remember to be outgoing, remember to nod and like do these things. Cause I would usually just like do this. It takes practice. Communication takes practice. It just, some people it comes naturally. I wish I was that person, but it's taken me years of practice. So I mean, yeah, communication is super important. You need to be able to communicate your findings, what you're asking for, documentation. You need to be able to communicate well. It takes practice, and you can develop it. You just have to be really intentional. Which, that's something I really had to be intentional about. Probably 5 years ago or so.
And for Alex, if you want to keep up to date with what's happening in the data analytics industry in terms of like podcasts and resources, what are your kind of like main places that you go to find out information?
Uh, YouTube a lot, believe it or not. I stay up to date with a lot of the other YouTubers. So like, Luke Baruch, he's a great resource. Kenji, Tina Huang, they're all great resources. My channel as well. I also do read a lot of, I'll like go on Medium and all about data science. Is that what it's called? I can't, but it's like a blog. There are some places that I go, but I do a lot. I do a lot of YouTube, believe it or not, where that's kind of where I keep up to date on a lot of different stuff happening. And I like Twitter. I've gotten into Twitter lately. So Twitter and LinkedIn are great places to keep up to date if you follow the right people and you follow the right pages and stuff. There are really great free resources out there to stay up to date, know what people are looking for and what technologies to focus on.
Have you ever been recognized on the street walking down as the YouTube
It
star?
happened the first time like 2 or 3 days ago.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. They were looking at me weird. And I was like, hey, like when you see somebody and they're just like walking past you and you're like, hey, what's up? Because they were like staring at me. And they turned around and they're like, are you Alex the analyst? And they're like, and they whispered to their mom and they're like, he's famous. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That is not true. It was the very first time it ever happened. It felt very weird. But yeah, they were really nice, and so yeah, that's the only time it's ever happened though.
Um, I am mindful of the clock. Just a couple of more questions just to wrap this up. Denise is asking, what came as the biggest surprise to you when you started your career as a data analyst?
Something that was really shocking to me was how little people, not how little, that sounds bad, how much, how I felt like everyone else knew everything when in fact, not everybody knew as much as I thought they did. My perception was that everybody was like, they knew these skills off the top of their head, they could do them, they knew the business information. What I found out is everybody researches almost everything. That is 100% true. Like I have a developer on my team. We just started using Power BI along with this other service that we've been like a legacy system. We started using Power BI, and I was like, "Hey, listen, I know you're not going to know this." And she's like, every couple days, she'll be like, "Hey, I just looked up how to do this, and now I know how to do this." I was like, "That's awesome." My expectation has completely changed because I'm like, "You don't know what this is. Why would I expect you to know?" That was the biggest shock, like the huge. I was like, I thought everyone just knew everything. Nobody knows anything. They know how to research well. They understand the basics. They know how to get things done. But a lot of people, they research things. They go on Google. They find better ideas than what they had. They use those resources to do their job better. That was a huge shock to me.
Definitely. That's super interesting. And also, as a data analyst, you can go down many different avenues. So there's like the whole kind of like spectrum of different ways that you can take the career. In your opinion, what are some of the kind of the most interesting avenues that you can go down?
Well, there's if you're, let's say you have a data analyst job today, you're a data analyst and you're like, okay, what's my next step? You can do what I did, which was go progress in analytics. You can be an junior data analyst, senior data analyst, manager, director. You can go all the way up. You can stay in analytics for a long, long, long time. Or you can switch careers. And there's some really closely knit ones that as you get into the field, as you start working as a data analyst, you'll start working with these people. You can go data scientist, which is more technical, pays well. I think that's a really good place for a lot of people. I almost went that route and I was like, I don't want to do that. One that I personally love and that I really was close to doing before I got this last job was going down the data engineering path or a database developer path. My SQL skills are just really aligned with that. And I really like that type of work of building those pipelines, data ingestion, ETL processes. I love that stuff. And in my last role as a data analyst on my team, I was working with the data engineers and database developers every single day. So I really started to understand their work and I was like, I could do that. And I really like that kind of work. So those are some. Um, you can you can also go, so like data analyst is kind of a general term, but there's more specific ones. You can go and you can be a financial analyst, marketing analyst, business analyst. I just had someone who was a data analyst who switched to business analytics because they was more aligned with what they like to do and wanted to do. Because they liked working with people on the client facing side and then translating those requirements and doing some of that work. So yeah, there's a lot of different options whether you just want to stay in that or branch out.
Definitely. It's a very broad career and a very exciting career. And Alex,
Mhm.
thank you so much for presenting this evening. I thought it was a great presentation. Thank you for fielding all the questions. I know that we had a lot of questions that we couldn't take this evening, but thank you for everybody for participating and being so engaged. What I would say is that Alex has done a fantastic video, which I think was released a couple of weeks ago, which looks at the CareerFoundry intro course, but also the full data analytics program. Definitely watch that out. Check out Alex's channel, Alex the Analyst. It's a great channel, lots of content. And if you're there, you might as well go over to the CareerFoundry YouTube channel because we've also got lots of videos about data analytics. Briefly, towards the end, I'll just say that currently we do have a special offer that we're currently offering 20% off our full data analytics program. If you click the little sticky, if you're in big marker on the right-hand corner, you can get a link to that. We'll also be posting that on YouTube and LinkedIn too. And all you have to do to secure that is book a call with one of our lovely program advisors, and our program advisors will go through the application with you. All super friendly. And if you've got any questions about the curriculum or maybe payment plans or maybe even jobs in your locality, feel free to ask our program advisors that and they will get back to you. Alex, I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. Also, thank you so much for doing all the stuff that you do on YouTube. Thank you for the audience this evening. And would you like to say any last words, Alex, about data cleaning, maybe?
No, one thing I will say, I know a lot of people in the chat are, beginners, or trying to get into the field. You know, I just want to say that I hope that you can push past the initial toughness of getting into this career. It's tough. It really is, especially if you don't come from that background. But I just want to tell you, like, a lot of his mentality. If you just keep going and you push yourself and you really can believe that you can do it and you push yourself to do it, you can make it happen. I truly believe that. And so I hope that, someone out there is a little bit more motivated and a little bit more at ease with getting into this career, after this session. And thank you so much to CareerFoundry for putting this on. It was really great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. And I wish, well, what time is it with you at the moment?
It's noon.
It's noon. Okay. A late lunch then. I wish you a good late lunch. And it's evening here in Berlin. And for everyone watching, thank you so much. And I'll just quickly say that we've also got some great data analytics events coming up. We've got an intro to data analytics event coming up with Dr. Humera, where we go through a data set from start to finish. And if you're interested in XD, I'll be back tomorrow with Craig Hansen looking at Adobe XD. So yeah, thanks, Alex, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and see everybody soon.